Hello and welcome everybody to the deepest dive on Mirror's Edge from MinnMax. MinnMax is a place about games, friends, and getting better. This show is meant to be the best, most thorough discussion about Mirror's Edge on the internet. I'm your host today, Alex Van Aken, and today I'm joined by Charles Hart. How you doing, Charles?
I'm doing great. I got introduced first. That never happens.
Yeah, we used to, we were the only two here that have been coworkers, so naturally you're number one on my list of people to talk about. You know what I mean?
Let's go.
You have a really natural banter so far.
Yep, we do. Thank you for pointing that out, Leo Vader. How you doing?
Yes, so good. So excited.
Yeah. Hello, Leo. And rounding out the crew today, Jacob Geller. How you doing, Jacob?
Parkour.
There's a lot of that. The amount of Office references in this, they just kept talking about parkour. It was pretty wild.
This game needs a dedicated, the way Stray has a dedicated meow button, this needs a dedicated yelling parkour while doing parkour.
Yeah.
I'm sure
you're jumping
somebody's
off a
modded
building.
that at this point.
I hope so.
So today we're going to cover the first half of Mirror's Edge, from the tutorial mission to the completion of the rope burn mission. If this is your first deepest dive, think of this as a game club where you can play along with us each episode. And then we're going to reconvene next Monday, September 16th, to discuss the second half of the game. Don't forget to submit your questions and comments for the second episode on Patreon this Friday, September 13th. That's when Ben Hansen's going to be opening up the call for questions for this episode, or the next episode rather. And if you're playing along at home and you want to know kind of like roughish estimation of what this commitment's going to be, how long to beat says it takes roughly 6 hours to beat. I don't think so. Unless like the pacing really changes in the second half of the game, I think you're looking at like 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah,
Alex, before we jump into it, Can I tell you about a very exciting offer that we have for people joining the MinnMax Patreon?
I love hearing about exciting offers.
As you might know, Patreon is how this whole thing operates. And if you jump in at even the $2 tier before this Friday, which is September the 13th, we will DM you a Steam code for Phantom Spark, which is a really cool looking kind of F-Zero-y wipeout game with like a story and cool character portraits. Or if that's not your thing, 2 random Xbox codes. Just reach into that big bag of Xbox codes and grab 2 of them, either Phantom Spark or those, either one for $2. Join our Patreon before this Friday. And also that's why we're doing this deepest dive, is because people join our Patreon and let wonderful former GI editors like y'all come on and do it. So if you like MinnMax, that's right. If you like MinnMax or you just like free game codes, this is a good time to jump on.
Yeah, I feel like the getting in on this deal for Patreon is the equivalent of like going to the Walmart bargain bin and reaching in, and instead of pulling out crappy old sports games, you pull out like actually good games that's right that you want to play. So
and you're supporting the Walmart of gaming, MinnMax.
Yeah, of course. Yes. Well, MinnMax always kicks off the deepest dive with a little game where my cohorts here have to guess the most common comment that was made on Patreon by, we got a lot of comments, actually, several pages worth. We're going to be kind of going through and reading off some of the very interesting ones or conversation starters as we go. But I went through all of the questions, found the most common sentiments, and I need you three to guess. What was the biggest takeaway, the biggest comment that was left about this game from the community? Charles, I'm going to go to you first. Keep the same order.
I was hoping you wouldn't. I'm trying to think, because I think the very first thing that happened to me when I booted the game up is I did think it was going to look worse than it did. I do think the stylistic graphics hold up surprisingly well. That was like the first thing where I was checking the year on it again, where I was like, is this really, was it 2008? It's like, I thought it was.
I was also going to guess just graphics. But to get more specific, I think I'll say how bad the cutscenes look compared to the game.
Leo, what about you?
Wild card pick, slamming open the doors. The many ways you can slam open the doors and how good that is.
I love that. It was kind of a two-way tie. So if you had said clunkiness, I would have awarded you points for that. Or the phrase graphics still hold up, which is pretty much exactly what you said, Charles. Okay.
So this is kind of a cop out, but I was going to start it out and be like, I feel like it doesn't feel as good as it used to, but I didn't want that to be the note I was entering the podcast on. So I feel good about
Yeah. But Jacob, on your point, the cutscenes did get, I think that was probably the next up. For instance, Michael Lane commented, I wanted to touch on the animated cutscenes. They have a sort of motion graphic comic book style that I feel negatively dates Mirror's Edge far more than its in-game graphics do. To me, it almost feels like a budgetary limitation more than a thoughtful choice. Parentheses, quite like Hitman 2's cutscenes, though at least these have full motion animation. I personally think I would prefer the cutscenes be done in-engine to be more comprehensive of the game's unique aesthetic. Does that ring true for y'all?
Yeah, I've always thought of them as looking like those old Esurance commercials. Like they have a very kind of corporate art style look in a bad way. And it's very weird for the more kind of stylized 2D art to have aged, in my opinion, very poorly. And then like the hyper realistic 3D graphics of 2008, I'm like, this still looks amazing.
Yeah, for sure. It's almost like their budgetary limitations, because it does feel like a different style. Like it's not going for the same hyper real style. I do want to shout out the people in the Twitch chat who do like the cutscenes. They're out there.
Shoji Koto on Patreon said, I've got to say, playing this via backwards compatibility on Xbox with the FPS boost enabled, the game still looks stunning, albeit why can I not say that word?
Definitely.
Albeit now at a crisp my southern accent came into play. Albeit now at a crisp 4K60. Also, I totally forgot the cutscenes and interstitials were animated like this. Looking back, it's really interesting. It's a really interesting juxtaposition, given it was DICE that developed this when they're known for big bombastic visuals with Battlefield. Yeah, I think it's I'm with Jacob and everybody else. That part definitely ages the worst. And it's funny because in between one of the missions, I think it might be between right before the mission flight, like the second or third mission, they kind of do like a Faith kind of runs around and is parkouring in the same perspective as the game plays out.
Is it the title sequence?
Yeah,
like,
I think you're right.
Like Mirror's Edge and developed by I love that.
Yeah, I think like that would have been great. Obviously, like, probably more budget than like these. It kind of looks like Flash animation, like the 2D. It just it's not great.
Yeah, we don't need to harp on it forever, but it is interesting to point out the corporate feel of it, like Jacob said, because you almost wish it was like an edgier, flashier style to match with like how often it is about the runners being coming up against the corporate enemy.
Yeah. Well, that was a fun game. Let's get into like our history with Mirror's Edge. Jacob, I'll go to you. Have you played this before? What was your?
Oh yeah, I've played this many times. I played it on PS3 near first release, if not like the year of. And since then, it's been for a long time a game where it's like when I get like a new monitor, Mirror's Edge is actually one of the first games that I boot up. And I made a video years ago called How Does Mirror's Edge Still Look This Good? That was kind of about the style. But while playing through for this, I realized that I've played like the first level probably a dozen times. And then by the time we got to like the third level, I was like, I think I had stopped by here, and so I had that experience that I think probably many people replaying Mirror's Edge do, which is like these beautiful memories of a game that are somewhat fulfilled and then somewhat running into the realities of some of the control issues and stuff.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm right there with you. I think I've played the tutorial through Jackknife, that mission series, probably 6 or 7 times, maybe more. And then we boot up Heat, and then later we'll get into it. But Rope Burn, I was like, oh, I do not remember this apart from like. I remember the color scheme, the color palette of Rope Burn more than the level itself. So it's been a while on that one, but I'm kind of. I don't think I've played it as much as you, Jacob, but one of my favorite games. I love this game. I routinely go back to it. I was looking at Steam. The last time I played Mirror's Edge, I think it was June 2022, before we booted it back up for this series. But I've got, it's one of those games like I have a physical copy of. I want to just make sure I have access to that game at all points in time. I played it on the 360 back in the day, just like Steve Bellegarde did from Patreon. Steve said, this is one of the first games I ever got all the achievements for back when it first came out on Xbox 360. Running through these levels again after so long, I was reminded of some of the old routes and moves needed to beat the time trials. I also remembered the frustration when a movie try doesn't work for seemingly no reason. We'll definitely get into that. That's a very common sentiment playing this game in the year 2024. But Leo, what's your history with the series?
Yeah, played it close to launch off of GameFly, I think.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, throwback.
What a throwback.
Yeah.
Did it without guns for that
Same.
achievement, and I don't think I ever played it again with guns. I maybe started it with guns, but the guns feel very new to me. They don't feel familiar when I'm using guns in this playthrough.
The only time I use the guns, I remember using the guns, are at the end of the game because I was just so frustrated. There's some really tough stuff.
There's like a sniper section that I'm worried about.
Yeah. But normally I just use them. I think it's in Flight or maybe Jackknife. When you're in those offices with all the windows you have to jump through and you're climbing up the top. I know that describes like 70% of the levels in Mirror's Edge. But they are... The windows get in your way and like you don't have enough momentum to break through them, so I'll shoot them out with the pistol and then do my route.
Because they leave the gun on the
table,
the desk. That's cool.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what to
That's
do with
actually
that.
yeah. Charles, what about you?
I have not. I don't think I've beaten the game before. I was looking at a playthrough just now on my other screen to find the point at which I stopped, and it looks like it's chapter 6. There is a like area with like a red staircase railing, kind of like it's like an indoor stairwell, but it's like all the stairs are red. And I remember being stuck there for like hours, and I was like, I'm not gonna look it up. I'm just gonna get through myself. I'm gonna figure it out. And then I for sure didn't, and then never finished the game. But I liked it up until that point. I think I played it on Steam as like a freshman in high school on my laptop. And I don't know how well it ran, but I have fond memories of it, even though I can't imagine it was like an optimal experience.
This is one of those games I forgot I had in my Steam library. I think it's gone on sale for $4 thousands of times over the years. So I feel like just a lot of people have it by happenstance at this point.
Yeah. Notable, and some folks talk about it. It's using that old physics stylized.
Yes, I wanted to bring this up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It does not run on my computer. I think if you have an NVIDIA card, it doesn't run well for you.
Well, no, I think, and this is again a throwback to 2008 when this came out, because it was an NVIDIA feature, and the idea was it would be built into some cards, or maybe more so. Back in 2008, dual GPU setups were actually more common, and so it was almost like you'd have one main card and then a separate card running PhysX, which is totally inessential. It doesn't change any of the gameplay, but it does make like plastic tarps in this game, if you have it running, look really good, like surprisingly good. And they're like glass breaks, I think, in a more interesting way, and some other stuff. But this was a thing where like this had it, and like some of the Batman games had it, and like Borderlands, and it would just be like there are more particles, there's more physics around, and then there is much less focus on like building physics systems for only one graphics card. That's not really a thing that happens anymore. But it is another kind of weird thing about this game that my computer can run it for whatever reason. And I always, when I get to those tarps, I'm like, physics, baby.
Yeah.
That's funny. I didn't know that I didn't really think about the physics connection, but when you go to the tarp and it gets blasted open by the helicopter, it was clearly like, oh, this is a graphics showcase moment. This is them flexing on me, the way this tarp looks. How way.
Yeah. Pelican Man on Patreon had a very rough time with physics, saying it's broken and will tank frame rate unless you go through an elaborate series of steps to fix it. And then, although Psychotic Sloth on Patreon was kind of in the opposite spectrum, saying, physics, my darling physics. I can't stop shooting those banners and tarps whenever I get the opportunity. That moment on the scaffolding when you kick the man to the tarp is so good. Remember the golden years when PhysX was in all the coolest games and used in a cool way, when we had the promise of future games doubling down on cool ass features like this instead of what we now have where developers chase a million reflections and tracing those rays. And then Ampex as well just had some, just saying it's extremely satisfying to look at. And I agree. I think in particular, like there's a lot of flourishes, not necessarily related to PhysX, but for instance, like just the way they use decals and stuff in the game, like when you get in the elevator and the police are shooting at the door, and you just get all the bullet hole decals popping up, and it just feels. One of the things I think the theme of Mirror's Edge, and I guess we can kind of get into the tutorial in the first couple missions, because they established this from the get-go, is like it never lets you forget the stakes. There is always something. It's running up like a series of stairs and seeing police chasing you underneath, or shimmying across a skyscraper or a ledge and seeing when you're in that big like dam area where you're climbing the platforms and there's snipers looking at you. You finally make it to the end and you look down and there's like you see flashlights looking up at you as you're making your escape. And then also like characters like Merc, who are just constantly telling you what's happening. And most of the time, like when Merc says like, you better run, Faith, they're right behind you, you don't want to know what's behind you. Mm-hmm. There's usually something behind you that if you wait long enough, they will catch up with you.
I think that's so well done. It's like it's a prolonged series of being just with Faith, escaping from the impetus of the story where you're framed for a murder, and feeling truly chased by people you truly can't defeat in combat. Still feels really great, and still feels like it really ties you to the character in the moment more than if it was just like a combat sequence. And that's, of course, the big complaint about this game, I think, is that there's too much combat when it doesn't need it. It's thrilling to just be running around these guys.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it does, I think, having played the first level a million times, I do think that like that first level is so good at showing you everything that Mirror's Edge like is and is good at, and you're constantly like gunshots behind you and helicopters and whatever. And then it's like, well, you kind of want that to be the whole game, but also as someone who understands pacing, you have to be like, okay, well, that would be exhausting if that was the whole thing. But then when you're in any other scenario, whether it is more of a combat arena or like trapped in sewers and trying to find like a thing to, like a wheel to turn, you're like, I just wish I was on a roof getting chased by a helicopter. Like that is always the thing that you want to be doing.
Yeah.
I find also that the like, and maybe this is like a different conversation, but Alex alluded to like clunkiness with the game of I found in my experience with the game, the sense of momentum always runs up against the fact that I like just barely miss a jump and it feels bad, or like I'm supposed to, I don't know. There's a time in the sewer thing where you're going down one pipe and you got to jump to a platform, but I slid past the platform, so I got to climb back up, and then I jump, and then I missed the platform on that jump, so I got to respawn and do it all over again. And then also the thing of, I feel like narratively sometimes I'm like, God, these cops won't leave me alone. How does Faith do anything in the city? I think it's like the third mission. It's the one with the sewers. She like, I don't know how they find her initially, but she's out for 2 seconds and then you're running through the what's it called? It's not like it's like the empty river basin water.
Oh yeah.
But just like
That's like the Half-Life level is what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. The Half-Life 2 level.
I like it for momentum, but it was always a thing where, like, narratively, I was like, I don't understand how she opened up a door and all of a sudden there's like 3 helicopters and 20 guys chasing her on foot. And then you get into the sewers, and like, Faith, they knew you were gonna get in the sewers, so they sent 2 guys with sniper rifles down there. Anyways.
Yeah, the snipers are terrifying in this game. Anytime you see those red laser sights, it's rough.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have too much trouble in this playthrough. I think I got sniped like one time where it ended my run. But the checkpoints in most of the levels are pretty generous.
Yes.
There is one level, I think it was either heat or rope burn. It was heat, where you have to navigate a series of scaffolding while a helicopter's looking over you, and the checkpointing in that one is awful. And it's also paired with some very unclear direction in terms of level design, where I'm like trying to jump off of scaffolding to try to make it to a ledge that in reality I'm not meant to, I can't get to. And then it's like, oh, if I turn around, there's a red, I see red, let me go there. But it took me 4 or 5 tries, and getting warped back to the start of this series of scaffolding was nightmarish. But
the worst checkpointing is when there is a cutscene that you have to watch before it, which weirdly is most punishing in the tutorial, where there are like a couple times where your little like trainer is like, Faith, watch me, let me do this. And she does like this sequence that can be like 30 seconds long of her kind of like swinging from pipes. And then you miss a jump. And she's like, no, Faith, watch me do this, and does the whole thing again. And I was like, I know, I just missed. I just didn't swing off the little monkey bar. I know what I did wrong.
No. I was when I was disarming Celeste, who's the character that Jacob's referencing. I disarmed her, and I'm reading the tooltip, and it's like, you can shoot the gun, but don't shoot Celeste. So I go and I look around, and I shoot the gun, and then it like fails me. And I don't know if I took too long, but it like just randomly warped me back to the start of that. I'm like, okay, let me.
That's funny.
Teach me how to disarm you again, Celeste. Before we move on, Ampex on Patreon had a comment I wanted to highlight about. You mentioned the valves and like having to sit there and stop and turn them. They called that out. They said there were a lot of moments where I questioned the level design and wondered why they ruined the flow of the game by adding valves. You have to rotate doors, you have to wait 15 seconds for them to open, etc. Before I realized they were all just hidden loading screens. It's interesting what felt like seamless back in 2008. Feels like bad level design now when we're used to more powerful hardware. I think in several cases it is loading something. I think there are a couple of cases though where I'm like, you're not loading anything here. This is just like here because you had that asset. And particularly when you're scaling, when you go into the dam, and the big giant circular chasm, when you're going back up it on the way out, there are a couple of valves where I'm like, did this need to be here? Like, I'm already spending 10 minutes climbing these pipes. That's probably the slow, like it just screeches to a halt.
For sure. It's like they're trying to make it feel more like a puzzle platformer at those points, where it's not quite about the flow or doing it as fast as possible. And I don't know how much that works, because I was coming up against the clunk too, and I wasn't sure if it was just me, but it's like the breaking momentum, like Charles said, it's almost the Sonic the Hedgehog problem of like going fast feels really good, but then I suddenly am made to go slow. Even if it's a little thing like vaulting a ledge just breaks your momentum completely, and then it takes so long to get back into a sprint. And in those like slower puzzle sections, it just doesn't feel good enough to not feel like kind of a slog to be climbing from pipe to pipe.
It really, and I guess this is a good place to say, like, I've never played Catalyst, so I don't know how many of these problems got kind of worked out in the sequel. But there are a number of things where actually I do think part of like, if you were going to speed run route a level, you could think through like, okay, if I have to pull myself up on this ledge, it is going to break my momentum. So maybe I can like jump there from something else and I won't have to stop running. And that's cool and that's fun. But there are a number, it's like there's no way to climb a pipe quickly. There's one speed that you do it, and it's slow. And it does feel weirdly punishing sometimes, just like how much they kill your momentum. Like, you have basically two moves. You can vault, or you can go up or down. You know, you've got your, like, RB is up and right trigger is down, and like going down just slows you down every time. And so, like, sliding under something doesn't feel good, because then you start running again and you're super slow. And it's like, when you watch, because I've watched like speedruns of these games, and they have like so many ways of avoiding any situation like that. And they like jump sideways and they get all their momentum back instantly. But it weirdly feels designed against its own like ethos sometimes.
This is a thing I noticed. I replayed most of the Assassin's Creed series last year, and there's an interesting shift around like Assassin's Creed 3, where the parkour in those games, starting from like 3 on, it is a lot less. It's just like you hold the button and then you move forward, and you kind of like automatically just kind of climb up walls and jump through stuff. But in like Assassin's Creed 2 and earlier, the parkour is like a form of puzzle. Like, you can't just climb up buildings to get to a leap of faith. Sometimes it's like, no, you gotta like shimmy around and then find the one thing you can climb up. And I think it's interesting in this game, which is around the same time as those like earlier Assassin's Creeds, where it's like parkour as a game mechanic is not just hold button, run, do cool flips. It is like, I don't know if what they thought of was cool in parkour was like figuring out what to do and like charting the paths and something. And that was a thing I think I just had to accept the game on its own terms, in that sense of sometimes I was going to mess up, and it kind of wanted me to do that because it wants you to learn and figure out the best way to do it. I actually replayed the first 2 or 3 chapters today because I was playing it on Steam Deck, and it was kind of like laggy, and like there was a part where they shoot a bunch of glass out and it was like lagging so much. I was like, I just need to replay this section. And I liked it a lot more when I replayed it, when I knew exactly where to go and all the best jumps to do, because it's a lot more fluid and quick. And I just think that's like an interesting decision that they wouldn't make today, but it's like very much of the time.
Yeah, did anybody do the time trials, or is planning to, or have in the past?
I did a couple of them, and I like did the first one, and I was like, wait, how do I even get to that gate? And it was weird, where I felt like I had to do it really slowly the first time because I couldn't even figure out like how to get up there. But if I was going to replay it or like spend a bunch of time, that's obviously where I would be spending my time, is those trials.
And I could see that being satisfying for sure. And I am super curious. People should write in with if they have thoughts on Catalyst, because I played it when it came out and I don't remember it at all, what all they ironed out. But I'm totally down for the parkour puzzle, and the more specific controls I always advocate for. Like, I love when Assassin's Creed Unity went to move up, move down parkour button, and even though I don't think it went far enough, and then the series never went in that direction again. But this, it's like, I also wish they went further in that direction. But the one thing that is awesome that they nailed is the tuck jump. Is the jump and then pull left trigger to tuck your feet up to get over things you might not perfectly be able to clear. That feels so good, and is that kind of like granular parkour control that I want. Like, and
it makes you land in the slide formation too if you hold it. That feels. I know the slide's kind of weird in this game. I think there are. In years since, there are a lot of really good slides in games now.
The bar is really high.
Apex has an incredible slide, and that's a game I still play pretty actively. And so, playing a game 15 years old, over 15 years old, we're closer to 20 years old now, and it's rough especially when you go to slide and you get stuck under something, or like it just kind of like you have to then like crawl out.
You have to do a little squat walk.
Dan V on Patreon said this as well. They said, is it just me, or is the sliding completely unsatisfying? I always find myself hitting the button a little too soon and then ending up stuck under a pipe and having to slowly crawl the rest of the way out. Not to mention trying to slide kick to an enemy, ending up 10 feet short and kicking air as he unloads his gun into me. I have less problems with the kick or the slide in combat for some reason. It's mostly when I'm parkouring that I think I just like, I'm with Dan, where like I pull it too early and then it's just
I mean, the best slide, unfortunately, again, the game uses its best thing in its first level, which is in that first level where you do basically the Jackie Chan stunt where you slide down the entire building. And it's like the game never feels cooler than that.
No,
and doing
never.
that, you're like, this is the greatest game ever made, sliding down that thing. And then similarly, when you are able to slide down, for instance, the escalator stairwell in the subway is another like, yes, you really feel like you're nailing it. But those are few and far between. And when you're just trying to slide on flat ground, yeah, you just don't go far enough, or it's, intentionally punishing to try and make you figure out some other way around it. But a lot of times I think there's only one way around it.
No, I'm with you. I think that one set piece is probably my favorite part of the game. That, and when you, at the very first level, when you jump off the building and grab onto the helicopter, and it's kind of like carrying you around, that feels great too. But Leo, I think I interrupted you. What were you going to say?
On the slide note, if slide kicks are tough, I recommend playing the game that I play when I play Mirror's Edge, and immediately had flashbacks to doing it the entire first time I played the game, which is trying to slide kick open every red door, which you can do and feels amazing, but you will end up short sometimes. It's like how I learn the slide kick is every single door I try to slide kick it open. It's very fun.
That's my go-to combat move. I do slide kick, punch him in the groin, come up, hit him twice, and then keep moving. And I never really use the jump kick. That one always feels the least accurate, where you jump in the air and then she puts all of her feet forward. The animation's awesome, but I like half the time I jump over them for some reason. I don't know how that works, but
I mean, and I've played at least the first few levels, and we'll see when I get to places where I haven't memorized the animations. It is so fun to just run up, get the disarm on the first try, throw the gun away, and keep moving. Is like my kind of like, if I am playing as Faith, if I'm really trying to be in character, it's just like take the gun, immediately strip it down, and throw it. Feels very cool. And then there is, again, it's like the game being ambitious, but not maybe polished. You can do a thing where you like wall run and then kick, and if you pull it off, it turns them around, so then you can instantly disarm them from behind. And it's so cool, but there's like 2 situations where the game actually sets you up to do it. And so it's just like so much effort went into this thing that then is incredibly hard and specific to pull off.
That's so funny you say that. There's a combat tooltip early in the game where it shows that it's a red line like going over a box, wall running, jumping off, and then kicking the guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and I always wanted to know where that part is, because they have a whole graphic for it, and I've never found it. So that's awesome to hear that you can do it.
Do you jump off the wall and do a attack, or do you attack while wall running?
I believe you jump off and kick. There's the one place that I've found to do it is when you come out of the sewer. There are a bunch of cops, and there's one by like a shipping container, and you can kind of pull it off. But it's like, you're better off just not fighting anyone there. But if you want to be cool, the opportunity presents itself.
Did any of y'all miss when you press that button to get out of the sewers and the crane pulls up the platform? Did you miss the platform the first time?
Yeah,
so many times. I did it at least twice when I played the first time, and I did it 2 more when I replayed it today. The first time I'm like, I don't even know what's happening, and then it's just gone. And then the second time I tried to jump, and then it's already too high.
Yeah, well, they have the runner's vision highlighting the stationary one. Yeah, so I press the button, I run and jump. I'm like, all right, is the level loading? What's going on? And I'm like, just kind of like turn around, looking, did I press the button right? And then I look above me, and there's it's like white, which it should be red. And so then it took me 2 tries, but yeah, there's that whole, like, the way they have that level design, that specific scene looks so cool. I think it's actually one of the more frustrating areas in the game when you come out of that mouth of the sewers, and you have to there's really, you have to, the way I got over that fence was I jumped on top of the trucks to the right of it and then jumped over. Is that how, do you remember if that's how y'all got through the fence there?
I went over a container on the left.
Okay.
Yeah.
Puck jump over the barbed wire.
Yeah. I think that section needs like one less enemy in it. It's really rough. And feels just needlessly hard. But go ahead.
I tried to do a Leo Vader thing and check out the settings at the start and see what I could turn off, and turning off runner vision is an option to play this game without runner vision. I said, that seems like something I would do. And so I turned it off, and it's very silly. It's just taking away like the things that turn red as you come up to them, the bounce boxes and stuff. And it's just like removing a bit of the game style for kind of no reason, because it is still clear where you're going, and it's still just, you just press that B button and it points you in the right direction. But yeah, I ended up relying on that, and I thought that was a smooth solution, is just you turn and look at it. It don't need an overlay on the screen or whatever. It just points you there.
Yeah, I mean, I love the runner's vision stylistically. I think having the button to look is good. I do think that the runner's vision is probably it is maybe too good in that it stops you from thinking about other routes through the level. You know, like it so much seems to be signaling this is the right way to go that I don't even think about like trying other things as I'm running through. And I know from, watching people play this game quickly, like there are actually lots of ways through several of these levels, but like I'm going to that red box. And so it kind of, it takes some of that potential decision making away.
Yeah, there's we had a couple comments about the, as they called it, the look where you need to go button. Tom Bowen on Patreon says, obviously the platforming is the main draw of the game, and it's incredible, especially when you get into a really good flow. This is only diminished when it's confusing which way you have to go and it slows down. The scaffolding sections are the worst for this. The addition of a button to auto face you in the right direction is genius, though, and helps alleviate this a little bit. I definitely think like it's useful. I like that you can run while also using the button. Whereas King Prometheus is kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum, saying the look where I need to go button, snapping your focus around and immediately killing the momentum and orientation was killing my flow on so many levels. It would have been nicer if it had either used more red elements to temporarily guide you in the right direction when hitting the key, or just turn the camera but not your actual current direction. Maybe this is muscle memory on my part, where like I kind of, now that King Prometheus kind of points it out, I guess like when you do press the button, I kind of like I play on controller, and I kind of tilt my left analog stick to kind of side run while I'm looking, and like I don't know. I think there are a lot of things in this game that if this is your first time playing it, it's a much rougher go. I think there's a lot of muscle memory at play in this game, and I've seen some comments on here as well of other folks saying that. I'll try to find them as we go.
Yeah, but it's a good point that it's like the more times you play through this game, the more you can kind of forget about the things that rub so much on the first playthrough. But even things like, normally when you're making a platformer, you don't make the things you're jumping between like the absolute maximum length you can jump. It's like, oh, you put them a little closer to give you a little wiggle room on each side. And there's one of the levels opens with a jump between buildings that is so far that I was like, this cannot be, it felt like you had to be.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
It's when I remember them by colors. So it's kind of like the orange buildings or whatever, but it's just like, I would do it over and over and like, just be like, God, I have to really feel like I am running off the edge of the building before I press jump in order to get enough distance to do this, which is just like a very kind of demanding way to design a game.
Yeah. Super Cerberus on Patreon kind of talks about like they brought up the developers of Celeste they had a Twitter thread a while ago talking about Coyote Time and kind of how there's that invisible grace period that this game severely lacks. Like, just give me a little time to, if I don't quite hit it, just bring me in a little closer so it would feel so much better. But Charles, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, like, with jumps like that, I don't think it's unfair because it's completely within the abilities of like the player character. Like, you can time it correctly, but it kind of feels unfair just because it's hard to get on the first go and the game is so much about momentum. And I think that's an interesting thing about the game, is that if you have played it a lot and you get really good at it, you can move at a speed and a flow that is how Faith would do it, as opposed to the game from the get-go being like, when you play this, you're going to feel like a cool parkour person like Faith. Like, it is less about, we're going to hand you this fantasy, and more like, you're going to have to practice and be good at it over time. And I don't know. I don't like it the first time, but it is satisfying to get through. I had never made the Sonic connection until Leo said it just now, and now it's all I'm thinking about. Just like playing through a 3D Sonic level when you know exactly where to go and all the things do, you're like, yeah, I'm the fastest hedgehog and that's the coolest thing in the world. Yeah. But that first time through is like when you're just missing jumps and you gotta like see Sonic's walking animation, which shouldn't be a thing. Is just I don't know. It feels weird, and I don't know.
And it's kind of why like Green Hill Zone is the best Sonic level.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, you can kind of do anything and you run through the whole way, which is how like the first level of this game feels. And then you have to like climb a scaffold in a really specific way, and you're like, oh no, my flow state.
I think it's also why Green Hill Zone's like always at the start of like half of the Sonic games. Is like, okay, people know this. Like, we're gonna get them feeling good, and then they're gonna hit the water level or some other bull crap where it's just the momentum is tanked.
Which is like a totally respectable choice that I like in theory. Is it not all being about the flow state and it being more about like you're really grounded to Faith's physicality, like we're talking about without that Coyote Time. But that would feel that needs to feel better. It needs to feel like I'm really her. And there's like so many simple jumps. I'm not even sprinting. I just need to get up to this ledge, but it just, you don't grab on and you fall off. Like so many deaths due to feeling like I should have grabbed on and I didn't. There's the deaths, like it's a red flag when 0 deaths feel like my fault, and every loading screen I find myself back in, I'm just like, this, why am I doing this?
Yeah, it feels like there's like, it's like, okay, you will grab the ledge, except if there's a railing on the ledge, then you can't grab the railing, or like you can pull yourself over this, but not if it's at a diagonal. And there are like so many kind of edge cases that the game does not feel consistent at all in like what it lets you do and not do.
And yeah, I think it would be, I think we wouldn't even need to have this conversation if it was like in the narrative of the story, Faith was like, we do this and it's really hard. Everyone messes up all the time. Like, it was framed as a difficult thing, then we mess it up. It's like, dang, yeah, this is hard. And me and Faith are like trying along at the same time.
No, they're always just like, I'm running's in my blood.
Yeah, it's not even a factor. It's not even really a plot point, the fact that she can run. It's just kind of implied that she will do it.
All I know is running.
Another weird like distinction between the player and Faith is like, or maybe what the game wants us to be doing, is like, never once in this game have I tried to look for the collectibles, because it just feels like completely against everything that the game is telling. It's like, hey, you want to like go slowly and poke around corners to find some yellow bags? And I'm like, no, I don't. Or it's like, you know, I just played Astrobot, and it's like, I'm finding every collectible in that game because like that's what feels good to do. And in this, the idea of like slowing down to look for those yellow messenger bags is just like, suck every piece of fun out of the gameplay in order to find collectibles.
I will say though, we're we're doing the deepest dive on the game, somebody in the community has to get all the collectibles.
Please.
And you may
We gotta
nominate
know what
yourself.
happens.
Yes. Somebody take
Yeah.
that on.
I love the comment when Merc is like, Faith, don't look behind you. You don't want to know what's behind you. And she's like, I don't know. Could be a yellow bag. No, that was it. That's what I interrupted.
No, that was a great point, Charles. No, I was just gonna say Pelican Man chimed in on Jacob's point, calling it baffling, to place hidden collectibles out of the way and parse the game where you're supposed to be running as quickly and smoothly as possible. It's kind of like that same like juxtaposition of you have to save the world, but also let's do this farming mini game. It's kind of like that for this game, right?
It should almost be more typical platformer, like here's the side route that's harder and there's a coin underneath this monkey bar.
Or,
do you think this game would be
like
way better with floating coins?
Yes.
power-ups.
Yeah.
I think there should be like a kind of a star system or something where it's like, do it quickly, do it without shooting, do it, without dying or something, where it's like you have kind of different ways to play through it, but you're always just trying to have like a perfect run, whereas it feels like these side things are just like stop doing the thing that the game is telling you to do.
Neil Smith in Twitch chat says they just finished a 30 out of 30 bag run last night, so everybody else can take it easy. Please write in, Neil Smith, next episode.
Get that bag.
Yeah, we want to know what happens.
And was it fun? Were there any cool
definitely
ones?
not something we can Google. You have to go and do that research for us. Rory Cunningham on Patreon brought up an idea that I hadn't thought of, but feels like would be a great addition, especially for players who are new. They said, I can't think of another game that needs a rewind function quite as badly as this one. Kind of like that Forza style rewind button. I feel like that could be cool here. Although I like falling because it's just like the sound effects and it feels really scary to fall in this game.
True.
But maybe if there's some kind of like meter where if you build up enough speed, you build up your rewind meter, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that negates some of the frustration.
Yeah, can we talk about falling for a little bit?
Yeah,
because I do think it's like an iconic thing in this game. So many games, especially if you're on tall buildings, they don't actually like render the ground. It's like you fall for a while and then it just kind of fades out and you're like, wow. And like this, having it be like, no. You are in Faith's head until the knees go through her skull. It's like, it is really disturbing. And I think if the game felt more consistent, I would love it, as like you're so afraid of falling, but because I have to try like this one jump in the first 30 seconds of a level 10 times, I do kind of get desensitized by how scary falling is.
Right.
Yeah, there was a couple folks that brought up falling and its relation to sound design. Let me see if I can find the question real quick. But they do, like, to your point, they render quite a bit out. I mean, like, I think there's only one case where I jumped and happened to die. Like, I think like my body, my hitbox like clipped through one of the buildings and it ended the sequence early. But other than that, it's terrifying. I can't find the question, but I'll try to find it in a bit. But I think like we have talked about a lot of the clunkiness related to the game. I will still say, playing this game, I still love it. It regardless, like all like spots and all, it is one of my favorites. I think it's just such a interesting look at mid 2000s game development. Like we've talked about the scope and the choices made there. I think also like the commentary that the game is, while there's a lot of really bad writing in this game, seeing like the set dressing and the like on the TV feeds or on radio barks, you can hear just like parts of the world that they talk about avian flu, the opening cinematics showcasing like police brutality and surveillance states and all of that. And it's very strange how it it very much rings true still today.
Although the elevator flavor text, which is ostensibly masking loads, is like so worthwhile and funny. There's like,
oh yeah,
signs your child might be a runner, like all this over the top anti-runner sentiment. And I love too when you're getting chased by cops, you go into an elevator and it's like that screen has been replaced with this elevator has been seized by the police.
Thickeroni of Cheese wrote in talking about they wrote out the signs, someone you might know be a runner, which I'm very thankful for because all of the points are just so ridiculous. So it's in the chapter Heat. There's a propaganda post, 5 signs someone you might know might be a runner. Number 1, telltale scuff marks on their clothes. 2, unexplained scrapes, bruises, or broken bones. 3, unreliable or unexplained absences from work or school. 4, calluses on the palm, knuckle, and fingertips. And 5, which is the best one, a fondness for the color red.
They love the color red so much they imagine it places. They picture things as red.
I mean, it's like I think talking about this is a game where like a story is very different than kind of setting for me, where it's like the things, I mean, like the things that happen in cutscenes in this game leave my head as soon as they happen. You know, like I just could not describe any of the conversations. But I do think that not only just the overarching like fascist police state thing is like a good place to set a story, but like what is the city's name?
Mirror's Edge.
Big city.
It has, is it like Eden or something?
Yeah, New Eden.
New Eden. I think it is such a visually striking, or the city of glass. Rob Bob in the chat says it is so striking just visually because it has the kind of thing that like Inception or Babe 2, Pig in the City has, where it's just kind of like every city in the world crammed together. You know, there are more skyscrapers than could make sense, just kind of reaching as far, but also like the kind of story idea that gives the game its aesthetic, which is whoever these, fascist whoever's are, like they are robbing the city of all its personality, and that's why everything is painted white. Like the city is just white and very boring because like that is an act of control. And so I just think it's like, I love just the look of this game is so striking on its own, but then tying it to the kind of tone and of course having your runner like change things from white to red is just like really cool kind of symbolism. And I think it works on more levels than just city looks great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
I think even like when you look down, like peer over the edge down at the streets below, like seeing cars go by, like everything is like some shade of gray, right? There's no color at all. And I think they kind of nail that. I think there's only a few times where like the color, like specifically the color red, misleads you in terms of like a gameplay mechanic, or is that like a guidepost? I do think like the lighting in this game does a lot of heavy lifting. I know everyone always talks about the bloom that it's just like it's overloaded in this game. I think it's great. There are some scenes though, if you're playing on like an HD TV or something, or OLED rather, you will not be able to see what's in front of you. Particularly, I think it's the third level where it's just nothing but white. But I think for me, like out of this set, I'm looking at my notes here from playing earlier today. I think out of all of the missions that we played through, despite their clunkiness, I think Jackknife is one of the more interesting levels in this game. It's the one that where you kind of start in the sewers. We were talking about it earlier, Charles, where it really does feel like a Half-Life level where like you're escaping along like a train track, like along the train. You're going through the tunnels underneath, and it's really where it gets away from the kind of movement focused flow and really gets into the more of the puzzle aspects of the game. I think the game is at its roughest at this point in time, but I think the variety of environments and scenarios within these missions definitely stand out. And I think in Rope Burn as well, the final mission that we played through this week, that train sequence at the end of that thing, just killer.
Genuinely so scary, like so dark.
Yeah.
You're moving like way faster than you're comfortable with, like faster than you expect to be asked to react to these like signs that are coming up to go left, right, jump, duck,
Yeah,
and do
and the part where
combinations
they
of like jump to
yell
the side.
like "Get to the other train," and it's like there are concrete barriers whizzing past, and so you just have to kind of like close your eyes and hope that you don't hit one.
Yeah.
And then the culmination of that, where you're dropping off the back and you're making to the door as this other train is speeding at you. They're like showing their control of the city. They are sending this empty train right at you like a missile. And you get out of the way and get up the stairs. And then you like hear that train hit the other one you were just on. And it sends a like knockdown to your character. You just fall on your ass from the vibrations of it and have to like physically get up within gameplay. That was such a cool moment.
Yeah, if you wait, I like to wait and you can watch it just ram into the other train. Like if you make it through. And so not only do you get that effect of the pushback, but you also just see all the sparks and all that. Just it's a really, really cool moment. That was probably the train was mentioned quite a lot on the Patreon comments. Specifically the part where like, having to run as the train, the bullet train rather is kind of like coming straight at you. People talking about the darkness within the train area and just like how it's so hard to see what's in front of you. I think that's like definitely one of the set pieces in the game that feels like oh, they're cooking here. Like it just feels like it was really coming into itself.
I was thinking about the like. There are a lot of times where the levels give you kind of bad disorientation, where you're just like, I just don't know exactly how the game wants me to like get up here. But then there are a lot of times that the game gives you good disorientation as well. That is kind of harder to define. But like, I think that train sequence is one. And we've talked about how satisfying it is to like kick the doors open or kind of smash the doors open. But like the feeling of being inside and running through a door at full speed, not knowing what is going to be on the other side of it, is like a really cool and kind of unique feeling. And the same goes if you're outside and running inside, where it's just like, all I know is I got to get away from what's behind me. And just the like instant kind of having to go like, okay, where am I? What am I doing? Is like a really kind of fun mindset to be in. And that train is making you do the same thing. So where it's just like, you just have to make decisions so fast. And I think that's, like whether it's because of enemies or environmental stuff, that is like the great Mirror's Edge stuff, is just like making these decisions as fast as you can possibly keep up with.
Yeah. Hauling Gas on Patreon writes in saying, there are few non-horror games that make me panic and stressed and immersed in terrifying situations. Mirror's Edge is one of them, Outer Wilds being another example. There's just something about the dynamic feeling of the chase scenarios in the game, like the invisible ticking clock in many instances where if you don't run fast enough, the enemies will catch you. So many games fake these aspects because they want you to feel like the enemies are on your tail, but they're actually not. It doesn't help either that the deaths in the game are so terrifying. In particular, I don't know, did any of you get hit by the train at all? Like, did any of you, like, as you're running on the track, did the train hit you? Oh, it's terrifying. Because like the headlights eventually just like almost like blind you, but then they still play the sound effect of like your bones just like turning to paste. It's real good. It's good stuff. Are there any other highlights for you guys that from like any of these missions in particular, like set pieces, that kind of thing?
Jackknife is the name of a character that you're chasing in the chapter Jackknife, right? That's
Yes.
his name?
Yes.
I really loved the moment where, you've been chasing him across the roofs for like a few minutes, and then he gets ahead of you, swings across a gap, and like falls and slams the back of his head and is knocked out unconscious. And then he broke the thing he used to get there. So you're suddenly like, how do I get to him? And then you get to him, and it's like, I don't think there's a line of dialogue about it. He just pops up and you continue with the story. But in my imagination at that part, I was like, damn, I wish this was like early on setting the mood or something. You're parkouring with your friend, and then they do that, and they end up knocked out across the way, and you like have to get to them to see if they're okay. Like, that's such a fun parkour situation to be in, like a weird tension and a weird thing to do with the idea. So it's like, kind of almost there here, but it, didn't really go all the way.
It's a really good moment of physics. Like, you see him because he kind of like tries to swing on something, and then that thing just like flips over, and it's like, oh, that is what would happen. This guy would totally eat shit trying to do this jump.
Yes.
I really like the way it, like Leo said, he just doesn't address it. I don't know why that's particularly fun to me. Like, he gets up and then he just like has a conversation as if you caught up to him normally. But I wish that happened. I like the chase sequence of it all. I think that's like an interesting thing because they talk about runners as like a breed of person almost, but you don't get to see that many other people in action other than like the tutorial, at least in these first few chapters. And I really enjoy chasing someone because that feels like the inverse of the ticking clock of like someone's gonna catch me instead, like I gotta catch this person.
And it almost feels like runner culture.
Yes,
that's
like
what
runners love to do. They love chasing each other.
That aspect is so interesting of like the way this again breed of person has found their way through this world.
Yeah, I wish it was a little less transparently fake. Like, it's like when you're chasing him, you're like, the game is not going to let me catch him. And I think it would be cool is like, if you were good enough, you could actually catch up with him before he wipes out. But like, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
Does he come back? Does Jackknife reappear? Shrug.
Absolutely couldn't kill him.
I would never spoil that catalyst.
I just think his character's so funny. I keep making fun of the premise of that level just because I think it's really funny of like, okay, Faith, there's a guy. He's on the rooftops around here. Faith shows up immediately. 3 helicopters, 20 dudes chasing you, shooting. Faith's like, don't worry, I'll go through the sewers. Merc's like, they knew you were going to go in the sewers. There's snipers and 30 more guys down there. You break out. You finally find Jackknife. He's just standing on a roof and he's like, hey, Faith. And then you chase him for 5 minutes. He wipes out and then with zero prompting tells you everything you need to know and says, see ya, Faithy, and then leaves and you just let him go. And it's like the perfect encapsulation of the game is cool, but like, just don't think about it too much. I played that level one too many times in the past week, and I've been thinking about it too much. But it's a lot cooler to just be like, man, a lot of cool stuff is happening.
I think there's kind of exactly one good character moment in the part of the game that we played, which is I really like the conversation between Faith and her sister that happens in the first level where you find out it's like Faith's sister is a cop and like, oh gosh, it looks like she's maybe been set up for having killed this politician, or you've been set up having killed this politician. But they do, in the game's like commitment, they do like a first person hug, which feels less awkward than every other first person hug. And I think it's like a really nice moment of like, okay, we're sisters. And that's it. And every other character in this that you meet is just a complete joke, whether it's Jackknife or like the giant wrestler guy or whatever. It's like, it feels like it's Saturday morning cartoons, but I really like that sister moment.
The sister moment is good. And kind of, I think it does a good job setting up the game to where like, you don't really have to know what's happening in the rest of the story other than I'm trying to save my sister from going to prison. Yeah. And that's a pretty good, piece of info to like serve as momentum throughout the story. And it's like, oh, this guy, does he want to send my sister to prison? Okay, I'm going to beat his ass. Oh, this guy, he wants to save my sister. Okay, cool. And just like a very easy way to follow. whatever's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to point out before we move on from Jackknife, Super Cerberus on Patreon says, did anyone else find it hilarious when Jackknife just ate shit at the end of the chase? It was an oddly sobering moment. Like, yeah, that's what would happen if you're trying to parkour across rooftops with a bunch of flimsy pipes and wooden planks. Also, he gave Faith a lot of information after being concussed, even though she wasn't threatening him. So why was he running in the first place?
Concussions do a lot for your mental state.
Yeah.
She proved herself superior. It's runner culture.
I think maybe because he's not a runner anymore. They were like, I don't know who he's working for now, but he used to be a great runner. I like to believe maybe he was just like, oh, come on. Oh, that'd be fun if we did one more run, wouldn't it? And then he falls. He's like, all right, I can't do this anymore.
He works in PR now, but he used to be a runner.
Also in that chapter, there's a line in the police chief cutscene where you meet him that I wrote down where he says, you better learn how to run to Faith, which classic setup to say to a runner.
I love when in the cutscene Jacob was referencing a second ago with Kate, the sister. Kate says, quote, this isn't the time to run. I'm not like you. And I just love it every second.
A well-defined character.
Yeah.
Shouts out N8BW7 in the Twitch chat who said regarding how Faith feels, they do say something in the tutorial about her coming back from an injury, so it's believable-ish she isn't her sharpest. That's an interesting deepest dive detail. Maybe it's canon.
I think it's interesting what an iconic design Faith has as a character for someone that you see almost none of in the game. Yeah, it's kind of the Gordon Freeman thing where it's like, I think that among game characters, Faith is pretty recognizable. One, just because she is, I think, an Asian woman, which, there just like aren't kind of a ton of in this style, but has like the cool tattoo and has like the very recognizable outfit. And it's like, you see her in graphics maybe 2 times in this game, like when she's reflected hanging from the helicopter, and then I think at the very end they cut to like a third person shot, but it's just like, it is kind of interesting where it's like, I think if people are like relatively interested in games, they would recognize Faith, and it's just funny that happens almost entirely from a first person perspective, or these other cutscenes where the character does not look like the recognizable character, really.
That's a really good point. Also, like when I was on the Steam Workshop side of things, just poking around, seeing just the amount of fan art that still gets posted about this game. I remember seeing like there's a really good like pixel art of Faith, and yeah, I guess like I kind of forget that. Like for some, like I was reading on the forums, folks are like still speed running the game. Folks are posting guides on there. I am still seeing like, screenshots, and maybe that's like, maybe I just don't poke around Steam enough, and most games kind of have that. But just to still see folks uploading sketches of Faith's eye tattoo and just like really, realistic paintings. It's pretty cool.
From those tiny, moments where you see her in game, and from like the key art and the box art. But I also think it's like a non-zero part of the equation of this, that you can look down and see your body, see your iconic shoes and your iconic pants. I think that does go a long way, and was unusual at the time, just besides like Halo or something or whatever, I guess.
No, and this actually brings up, I forgot about this until just now, but I'm watching it on YouTube. You can mod this game to play it in third person, because it is, you are playing as a character, and like her arms and legs are animated because you can see them. And it's this very uncanny kind of like, some of it looks pretty good, but then it's like her upper body does not move at all while she's running. It's just like perfectly flat. And then some animations she's just kind of T-posing through. But like there is a body that you are playing as. It's not, it's not an illusion. You can take the camera outside and like see that Faith exists in the world.
I'm curious right now. I'm searching for people on LinkedIn. This feels, so Leo and I play a game called The Finals, which whenever I play The Finals, and if you don't know, The Finals is a first-person shooter. A lot of ex-DICE folks have moved over and worked on it, specifically like Battlefield folks. But that game in particular often makes me feel like I'm playing like a more simplified like movement system from Mirror's Edge, and just like the bloom, the way things are looking. So I was just doing a quick search to see if the art director or any of the artists that were on Mirror's Edge happened to be working on that game, and I don't see any matches yet, but there's certainly like, I think like Mirror's Edge and like Battlefield 3. I think that the art direction in those games, I think more so in Mirror's Edge, have kind of like influenced a fair amount of games that I think we're still, or a series at least, that we're still playing and like seeing like old pieces of DNA from those games. And it's something that I recognize still today. And something that I think games like Dying Light 2, while they have certainly kind of improved the parkour and improved navigation through like really neat set pieces, they do kind of are missing that that really, I think, striking art direction that Mirror's Edge has continued to kind of uphold throughout the years. But
yeah, Dying Light 2 is an interesting comparison. It has come so far, and that I feel like is really trying to do a similar thing to Mirror's Edge, of the physicality and you are this body and you're limited by what your body can do. And the finals is like another direction it's kind of grown in, where it is still momentum based, but it's just a lot more generous, and sliding is like, feels hyper real. It goes past what it would really be like into this new fun gameplay system where you're trying to keep your momentum going by like bunny hopping and doing like angled jumps. And it's a little more, it's my instinct is to say it feels more physics based, but I don't know if it even does. It's just like more generous with the physics.
Yeah. And I just think it's interesting that a lot of that can be kind of traced back to like mid 2000s DICE and the work that they were doing on games like this.
Yeah, I think it is interesting how many times Mirror's Edge has kind of been kind of slotted into other genres, you know, that it's like, okay, now you can play a zombie game with parkour, or now your battle royale has, you know, like these systems or whatever. But like, there are not, I mean, certainly in the AAA space, like Mirror's Edge is pretty singular for only doing this one thing. And even though there are guns in the game, the guns feel so bad that, like, I think purposefully, that it's like, it's not the point. You're only running. The game is only about running. And I think maybe it's too specific, or it would be kind of like too costly, because it's like even Catalyst, which, as I understand, is still mostly about running. It's like, it has you do a bunch of open world activities. You're like finding flags and, you know, doing all this stuff. And it is part of why Mirror's Edge stands out, that is just so like, it is so narrowly designed in this kind of amazing way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I really do. After we finish playing through Mirror's Edge, I want to like go and play Catalyst, because I think I was kind of scared off back then from it. Kind of got, I remember it being panned pretty hard, or at least more harshly than the first game, which doesn't have amazing reviews to this day. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think we've touched on a lot of them. But
yeah, I'm curious about Catalyst too. It's like it feels like a time when we were more harsh on collectathons because we got more of them, maybe. And that's kind of what it felt like, is like, let's take this game that had, you know, like you said, not great reviews, but definitely beloved, you know, cult classic, and make it a little more like fit into the mainstream structure that kind of seemed like all games were for a minute. But it might be a more fresh, more worthwhile. No.
Charles, I'm curious. You mentioned earlier in the show the scene. I'm remembering where it's at now. The scene with all the red stairs leading up to the doorway, and that's like the kind of like that's like at the like I guess like the halfway point of that mission in Ropeburn, where the wrestler Ropeburn pulls you out of the stairwell, throws you down, and then you have to like get that timing of disarming him so perfectly. Otherwise,
you're watching that cutscene again.
I know. Have you made it to that part yet, Charles, or did you not have a chance? I'm curious if it stood out.
I think I'm thinking of a different time, because I don't think it was
more.
I think it's in the future. I don't think we've gotten to the part yet
great.
that I got like stuck at.
Okay, all right.
But I haven't. I think one thing that wasn't intuitive to me that is now, that has definitely helped me get through it faster, is the idea of running up one wall and then turning around and then jumping to somewhere else. Because I would think like, oh, I just can't reach this spot.
Yeah.
And then realize like, oh, that's going to solve a lot of my problems. So I think that's probably how you beat the section. But I'm pretty sure it's in the section after the last one we played.
I on that point, I wanted to bring it up earlier. I think that move is awesome. I know it's probably, I know there's some people that I'm sure hate it, but I think it consistently, you almost always hit the ledge that you're trying to hit. I think that's the most generous that the platforming is when you're doing that wall run, jumping back and then grabbing another ledge. And when you're doing that mid chase, it feels so good. It's like, yeah, I nailed that.
Our right bumper to quick turn in general is a great move and very consistent in the tool set. And I love, this is going to be a long jump. Let me run back to the start of where I'm going to be able to build up speed and then do a 180 at the end. And you kind of like skid to a stop and get ready to do your full sprint down the length of it. Like, it is a fun option to have. Fits in stylistically.
Is that I don't play a lot of the series. Is that like a hallmark of like Resident Evil, like the quick turn? Or am I thinking of
in a lot of third person shooters, you can kind of do the like pull back and press B or something, is like in Resident Evil, you spin around. But it's different here, where it is like most first person games don't have it, unless, actually, this is kind of interesting. Now there are a lot of horror games that have it, where it's something like Outlast, where you're going to be running away from some monster, and just to be mean to yourself, you can turn around and see that monster chasing you.
Yeah. I think Dying Light has a similar button. That's really fun when you're being chased at nighttime to use. Well, cool. I know I think we've talked about the game as much as we played the game at this point.
I have a couple more things that I want to hit. One,
please do.
Those big underground sewers that we have talked about that have the snipers in them. Yeah, that is very based on a real thing that you can look up. They're like the Tokyo flood canals are like these, like seemingly as big as in the game, these giant kind of concrete bunkers full of columns that
my God.
It looks exactly like it. Like I think they have said that's where they got it from. So that's really cool. And I think it is cool that this game was clearly made by people who love architecture. I just like, sometimes you just get a game like that and it really kind of tickles me. The other thing that I want to talk about in that opening cutscene, Still Alive, I think is like one of the better game songs. And I think, weirdly, there are two game songs called Still Alive, not the one at the end of Portal, but I really love that kind of track, both the instrumental one and the one with vocals. It does just feel like so connected to this game for me, and I really like that the game has this like really cool musical connection. And when you're like in the first cutscene, when it's playing and you're running and looking out at the city and you have it's just like, it's super evocative. I love that song.
I think one of the songs that's stand out for me, and I think I think the soundtrack is done almost entirely by a band called Solar Fields. Mm-hmm. We had a couple folks write in on Patreon just kind of complimenting it. Serbu being one of those people just mentioned like the soundtrack is one of their favorite parts of this game. I think for me personally, when it really starts to hit is at the start of Rope Burn, when the sun has now set and suddenly everything's just cast in this like golden hue, which is the first time the lighting really drastically changes in the game. And you've got like this like really soft, like plucking arpeggio going, the synth that just like slowly builds and then of course eventually explodes as like a chase breaks out. But I really like the soundtrack at its quiet moments quite a bit. I think like there's a lot of really neat instrumentation going on that I think is sometimes lost in the moment of when I'm just so focused on like trying to get to where I'm going and not dying. Whereas like when you get to like when you're climbing up that pipe or that ladder at the start of a level and you've got like this time to like soak in the visuals. Also on your note about being based on Tokyo, the underground area, I think there's a level where you're looking out and you see a boat in a bay, like in the background, and it really reminded me of Tokyo Bay. And so it's funny that you also say that that underground section is reminiscent of the discharge channel in Tokyo.
It is. I think often when environmental artists are attempting to envision what the future will look like, they think of Tokyo, and it's like there are a lot of like even in movies like in Her or in Big Hero 6, the kind of cities of the future are like an American city has been smashed into Tokyo and kind of like seeing that culture clash. And I think it's an awesome aesthetic. We have said so much about it, but like, I just love a game that takes place in a city the whole time, and a city this kind of well realized.
For sure. And the fact that the story is taking you through it, taking you in and out of buildings that are kind of building your understanding of the city, that feels cool. It's just a cool structure for a campaign.
Yeah. I also like the consistency. We've talked a lot about like the color red, and I like when you go inside of I forget which level. It's a recurring theme where if you hit somewhere that's green, most of the time it is a break. So like when you get through like the green concrete hallways, it's usually like an interstitial, and then you're going to go through a red door and then it's going to hit again. There is one exception, at least in this first half, where you are, I think it's when you're talking to Kate, your sister.
Yeah.
You are like in this green office, but again, at the start, it's kind of a break, and then you walk up and start the cutscene, and then the chase starts after the cutscene. But whenever I see that color green, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get a little respite from this chase. And I think he does it really well as well.
I love the touch that like there are potted plants, but the potted plants are actually just a white, and then they're kind of colored by whatever like paint color is near them. So it's like, oh, there are some nice green plants, but then you look at them and it's like, wait, no, the green is being bounced off the wall.
That's so
onto
cool.
These just white plastic plants, which is like another great touch.
I love it. I think there's something about it, about like the fairly like, it reminds me of some of like, so I really enjoy like working on 3D art, and I've like picked it up in recent years. And one of the styles I always try to like mimic is when I'm like learning something new about it is Overwatch, because they do a lot with little texture. It's a lot of flat matte surfaces with like bouncing color, and it always gives me this like sense of like being in a diorama a bit, like a toy like area. And this game gives me that same feeling where like, yeah, there's like glass, and like I feel like there's glass materials. There's obviously like when you get up close on like a pipe, you can kind of see like the smattering of like grease and just like the remnants of like what it took to manufacture these things. But like if you're 3-4 feet out from any object, most of the time it just like has this like really nice flat matte look. And I think that also is why it ages so well, is you don't have like these hand painted like textures that I think like age poorly in most games. I think of WoW, which is my favorite game of all time. Partially the reason it looks so dated, and it's like it looks dated, but it also holds up. It's like the hand painted textures can really do you dirty. But like if you go for something flat and just use color theory and post-processing effects and lighting, you can get really far and have something that is more timeless. And I think Mirror's Edge is a fantastic example of that in art direction, and games specifically. And I just, every time I see it, especially when I'm like looking over, it does feel just like I'm looking at this like little diorama, and I just want to like rotate it and look at it and inspect it.
And that's what the level select screen is.
That's a good point.
It is literally a diorama of the city, and you kind of zoom around it.
Yeah, damn. I didn't even pick that up. That's such a great point.
That's cool.
Jacob, did you have anything else on your list that you wanted to touch on?
There's one time where you slide down a subway, and the subway roof is orange, and it's this incredibly cool, like rocky orange texture, which is also a real subway that I think, I don't know, was in like Prague or something.
That is so cool.
there are little touches here, but I can't wait to get to the second half of the game, which I remember much less.
Me too.
To see what's going to happen there.
I remember a really elegant, like almost hotel lobby leading up to a helicopter platform, and that's really my only memory.
I think that's the last level.
I think that's the final approach. That's all I remember for the second half. So I'm really excited to dive in. Leo, overall thoughts before we kind of wrap up?
Yeah, was surprised by the clunk for how like often I think about it and fondly I think about it. That first level goes such a long way, and so much about the choices it made, the distinct look, the music for sure is a big part of this game's staying power, and going back to it is a little bringing back down to earth. There's certainly some things that feel like a lot got cut from this game. That rope burn fight, quote unquote, where it is the one QTE, that feels like you see him like 3 times before then you get the lore dump on him. It's like it feels like a boss battle is coming up and it is just a cutscene with 1 QTE. And that felt like there was probably supposed to be more here, right? And then it's one of those cases of just so much work to make this very new idea for a game work in the most basic way that you have to maybe cut corners. This is all.
That's a really good point. Theory. When he's hanging there, I always expected you were going to pull him up and like the second phase of the boss fight was going to start. But instead he just gets shot and it's over. And it's like, oh, okay.
Totally.
I guess I'm going to get back to running. Which is what the game does best. Yeah.
Yes. Last note I wanted to mention, there's a lot of vertical falls down vents into new areas that you take damage from or else you roll out of. Yeah. If you remember to roll out. But that momentum just feels weird to me because it's like in a parkour sense, you're kind of transferring your sideways momentum into a roll to make the landing not feel so hard, but you're falling just straight down into it. And for, anybody who said that there wouldn't be enough to talk about for this deepest dive, I invite you to suck on that.
Bug Jelly on Patreon brought up something similar. They were kind of looking for advice, but they said, has anyone ever figured out how to reliably tuck and roll? I feel like I had it when I was younger, but this time around Faith is taking those falls directly to the soft tissue in her knees every time. I think for the most part it feels really reliable on like the standard tuck and rolls, but what Leo's talking about, like where you in those vents you can't see, you don't know you don't see the depth of like how far you're falling.
Yeah.
So it feels really hard to land, and I'm almost always taking a little damage, which is usually like it gets into a chase scene usually like right after that too, which is like adds even more tension to it.
Maybe the worst second of gameplay that we played here is when you're in the sewers and you slide down that sewer thing with water on it, and then you hit the ground and you take damage, but if you roll, then you just roll off the side into the pit.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I
think it wants you to jump and wall run there, but
because you can shimmy.
That's how you get across.
Yeah, I did the little shimmy.
Okay.
That's a really good point. I remember that. I'm like, oh, that felt awful. Another thing where it's like just feels like you're being punished. And it's like, oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It feels off. Charles, what about you? What are your overall thoughts on this first half of our deepest dive?
Yeah, the one thing we talked about the signs your child is a runner. I just like in general the concept of the elevator news. Like that's just not. Yeah. I was doing it. I remember being like, deepest dive, gonna dissect this game, I'm gonna read the news in this elevator, and I don't remember what the news said because halfway through I was like, is there news in elevators? Is this like a thing in elevators I'm not seeing, or is this like a sci-fi thingy? And I just like the plot device of like, here's the thing, every TV always on, every TV always tuned into one of the 2 news channels, and also there's news in the elevator at all times.
Also a lot of text. You think like they'd use some more video options.
Yes,
sure. Some B-roll. If I was making those commercials, absolutely. I would do maybe some kinetic typography. Really get in there, get some motion graphics going on.
Man, someone just should like hire you.
Scrolling. I know, right? Somebody should hire me to.
You should definitely be employed. That's what I
would. I would really, really love to be employed. So if you're watching, hit me up. Specifically, Charles, you talked about those elevators. We already talked about the part where they like talk about the signs you're a runner. My favorite way is they intro that as the newest threat to kids. I don't know. I think that's great. Also, the avian flu bit in the first elevator feels weirdly cyclical because I was just reading about avian flu like 2 weeks ago. I feel like on somewhere, some news story. Mm-hmm. I like when Faith says ACAB like all the time in the first couple of missions. She's like, "Of course I can't trust a cop," and then of course he goes and betrays you.
Right, could not believe that.
I do. Yeah, we haven't really talked. I mean, we've talked about like the nonsense that is the story and just how it's like kind of there. I do just as a point of reference for people watching. I want to get a quick recap of the story so far. So that
for the people watching, we all know it.
We all know. So tell me if this sounds right, because I didn't Google it. I was just like from my memory.
Respect.
Yeah, thank you. Very impressive. Faith is trying to keep her sister Kate out of jail. Kate is being framed for murder and is going to prison if Faith doesn't help her. Faith took evidence from the murder scene, which was a piece of paper that said the word Icarus, I think, which is some kind of nefarious plot that they keep referencing.
And they walk you through the story of Icarus like it's not.
They do.
Do they? Okay, I don't even have that written down. I forgot about that.
Yeah, Merc explains it to you.
Okay, all right. There is a character named Merc. He's like he's your buddy. Him and Celeste are your two allies in the game. Maybe Jackknife will make a reappearance. I don't think so. I don't remember.
God, I hope so.
Miller is the police chief that kind of like feeds you a lot of the information, but then ends up kind of betraying you, but then decides not to shoot you after you disarm him and point the gun back at him, and then you give the gun back to him, and you're like, better not shoot me next time or I'm going to put a bullet in you. And you just hand him the gun back and he decides not to kill you now because you did something cool.
That's how action movie logic works, Alex.
Ropeburn was a wrestler. We only ever saw him in a full tux. Did not look like a wrestler. He very big guy, bald. See him on screen like 3 or 4 times. He's working. He has something to do with Icarus. Anyways, he gets killed by the people employing him, I think, and that's where we leave off. Is that right?
I also want to mention that the person that Kate allegedly killed was I can't remember his first name, but Pope. He was running for mayor, and he's like an old family friend of theirs.
Yes, their dad's friend. Yeah,
and he's probably like genuinely bringing about change. That's what his posters are about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's seemingly the good kind of politician, not corrupt. I think that's where we leave off for the story, in case anybody at home really cares about that in the video game Mirror's Edge. But yeah, overall, I'm kind of with you, Leo. Like it's kind of sobering to play the game and be like, oh, do I like it as much as I remember? It's definitely one of those games where it's like, this is one of those games when people talk about 6 and 7s out of 10s that are really interesting being among their favorite games. I feel like Mirror's Edge is that kind of fulfills that for me in a way. I remember the game being rougher the further it goes. So we'll see how that carries on next week.
I remember a boss fight that I'm not looking forward to. I don't remember. I just remember like there's a boss at some point. So we'll see. But also, playing this took me, I don't know, an hour 15. So
yeah.
Even if it takes me twice as long, I'll be happy.
Yeah, same. Thank you all for watching this episode of The Deepest Dive. Of course, there are tons of episodes of The Deepest Dive if you want to go check out the playlists on YouTube. There's a really great one from earlier this year on Shadow of the Erdtree, which I actually haven't played yet, and I'm planning to play along with the VOD version of that Deepest Dive. But yeah, all of this is going to be on MinnMax's YouTube channel. Thank you for those of you who are watching live on twitch.tv/MinnMax Show. Don't forget, as Jacob pointed out at the start of the show, a lot of this is, MinnMax has really stepped in and helped several of us at Game Informer with some work, including this very Deepest Dive. Ben tapped me. He's like, hey, I want to support you and help pay you And why don't you pick a game that you maybe want to do a deepest dive on? My first pick was Dishonored 2. I do want to point out, which maybe in the future we can do, but or at least y'all can do. I just want to listen to it. But then we picked Mirror's Edge, and that got a lot of votes. So thank you everybody for voting for this game. It's been fun to replay it. But yeah, don't forget, go support MinnMax, patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's.
At the $2 tier, the $2 tier or above is how you submit comments on the Patreon, which also gets you those game codes like Jacob talked about. Then that will open this Friday, September 13th for your comments for a recording on Monday, the 16th. Yeah.
Yep. And if you want to follow along, I don't think we've nailed down a time yet on Monday, but I'm sure there'll be tweets. You can follow MinnMax on social media to see when we're going to be going live. But yeah, thanks y'all for having me. Thanks for chatting with me.
Thanks for hosting.
Y'all caught a lot of really cool stuff that I think I would have missed. So it's been fun. And I don't know how y'all sign this off, but have a good
there's
time.
the MinnMax catchphrase. You know the MinnMax catchphrase?
Get better.
Come on, guys, get better.
It's about games, friends, and getting better. Yes. Play well, be well. Happy gaming.
That's good. That's good.
That's it. Stay running.
When you're here, your family.
Stay running.
Stay running. That's really good. I'm gonna get that tattooed on my body somewhere. Never stop running. Are we still live?
Keep going.
Did you know that you can double the amount of MinnMax podcasts you listen to every single week right in your favorite podcast app? All you have to do is go to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's, jump in at that $5 tier, and then you're good to go. You have the podcast version of The Deepest Dive, Max Spoilers, MinnMax Interviews, weekly access to Bonus Pod, which is our Patreon exclusive podcast. It's very good. And early and ad-free versions of the MinnMax Show podcast every single week. There's a ton of content in there, and it's a way to directly support what we do here at MinnMax.